Welcome back to the California Conversation. I'm Tess Abraham. Ranchers in Point Reyes, California are being forced to close down their operations after over 150 years of multi-generational family farming practices. This raises serious questions about California's environmental priorities. It is no surprise that California prioritizes things like reducing climate change, reducing greenhouse gases, but we have to ask serious questions about these goals when they start to impact the lives of real people. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get started, make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you stay up to date on all things California politics. So, who are the Point Reyes ranchers? This is a group of farming families who have operated cattle and dairy farms in Point Reyes, California, which is in Marin County up near the Bay Area, for over 150 years. They contribute approximately 17 to 20% of the agricultural production of the entire county. And it's approximated that they contribute about $60 million to the overall local economy.
That is a lot of guacamole. A lot of the green.
These ranches provide jobs on the farm, but they also provide jobs off the farm when it comes to things like veterinary services, cattle feed, all of the services that they use to keep their farms running, even just in the local community. So what happened? If these farmers have contributed so much to Marin County, then why are they being forced to close down their ranches? Well, it is no surprise that that is due to the actions of environmental activists who center their concerns around one species of elk, the Tule elk. Yes, you heard that correctly. Farmers are being forced to close their doors and leave their homes because of one species of elk.
Well, let's start the insanity.
What are these elk doing in California and why are they important? Well, originally the Tule elk were native to this part of California in the 1800s. After people and these farmers started to settle more in these regions of California, then it was thought that they had gone extinct. But years later, 10 Tule elk were found more in the middle of California, and so environmentalists really wanted to repopulate them and bring them back to Marin County, where they originally were from. So in the 1970s, they did just that. They moved them back into Point Reyes, where these farmers operate their ranches. Now, naturally, this causes a problem because if you are raising cattle on a dairy farm, then that's going to create some competition for resources. Of course, the cattle need grass to graze, but the elk also need areas to graze. And then with that, California is prone to drought. And so both the cattle and the elk need large amounts of water. Because of this conflict, the ranchers in Point Reyes pushed the National Park Service, who operate the areas where the ranches are located, to maintain the population of the elk and to help reduce this conflict between animals. But the problem is that environmentalists took issue with the methods that were used by the National Park Service. So originally they set up this fence so that the elk couldn't graze past a certain point and so that they wouldn't come into contact with the cattle on these farms. But additionally, they also limited the number of Tule elk that were allowed to populate each year. So that number was 120, which means that any elk that populated over that amount would be killed. Obviously, environmental activists are going to take issue with this. So for over a decade, the National Park Service has actually been locked in legal battles with different various environmental activist groups over the Tule elk. And so the result was that in January of this year, it was announced that the Point Reyes farmers would have to close down their operations. Clearly, our state's environmental goals care way more about a species of elk than they do about you or your family, but you can still take care of your family and your health with companies like We Heart Nutrition. We Heart Nutrition is a family-owned company that creates high-quality research-backed supplements so that you can live well. But the best part is their commitment to giving back. They're not here just to sell supplements, they're also here to support life in every way that they can. So 10% of their sales go directly towards supporting pro-life pregnancy centers across America. They are pro-baby, pro-mom, pro-life, and American-owned, which really, it just does not get any better than that. But additionally, on top of that, they still create a high-quality product. They have all the essentials for both men and women, so if you're looking to support your body better, then you should check them out. Use my code TESSABRAHAM to get 20% off your order and to support a company that shares your values in the marketplace. Go to weheartnutrition.com/TessAbraham or use discount code TESSAbraham at checkout in order to get 20% off your order to support moms and babies in need and to support the show. Getting back to the Point Reyes ranchers, while the closure of these farms is not a direct result of any state law or new policy, it absolutely is connected to the larger trends and policy priorities of California.
Amen, sister. Amen.
California has some of the strictest environmental policies across the country, and groups like the California Coastal Commission or the California Air Resources Board all help to shape the climate in which decisions like the closure of the Point Reyes ranches are closed down, even if they are not the ones directly issuing the orders themselves. But maybe you're thinking, I don't live in or around Point Reyes, and so why does this really matter for me? Why should I care, and what should we learn from it? For Point Reyes specifically, there are a few outcomes that I think all Californians should be aware of and should care about. First are the ramifications on the ranchers' historic and cultural legacy. Again, these are families who have been farming in the area for over 150 years, and many see this being forced out of their farms as a betrayal of that ranching heritage. Then there are impacts on the local economy and on food production. These ranches provide jobs, they provide food, they provide so much contribution to the local economy. Even if you don't live in Marin County, we should still care about local economies thriving because they still contribute to the overall state economy. So we don't want to see them fail or fall on hard times. Point Reyes farms are smaller, more sustainable farms, not just large factory farms. And so we don't want to cut off local food sources, especially when it's done just to preserve and protect one species of one animal. Truly, who does that help? Why is the life of a Tule elk worth such a large hit to the local economy and also the displacement of hundreds of workers? Which brings us to the most important outcome, and that is the local and human impact that this has. These ranchers are real people, not just political pawns. Generations of these ranchers have lived locally. They've raised their families there. They've sent their kids to schools in the area. They have supported businesses in the local economy. One rancher summed all of this up when he said that the closure of his farm feels like death. And that makes sense when you realize that you're not just closing down what he has built, you're closing down what his parents have built, what his grandparents have built, what he hoped to pass along to his children. You're taking not only just his livelihood, which is a big enough effect in and of itself, you're also taking his home. You are taking everything from these ranchers. Environmentalism should include human communities, not just ecosystems and not just animals. But sadly, this has not been the only case in our state that has revealed the policy priorities of putting plants or animals over people. Take, for example, the California gnatcatcher. This was a bird that was listed on the endangered species watch list, and so because of that and because its reliance on coastal shrub in Southern California, many developers could not develop more housing in Southern California, an area that needs so much more housing because the land has been preserved for habitats. Or take gray wolves. These animals returned to California in the 2010s after nearly a century of being absent from the area, and farmers started realizing that these wolves were attacking and killing a lot of their livestock. But the species is protected under California law, and so farmers are not allowed to kill these wolves in protection of their cattle or their livestock. These examples just go on, and unfortunately, it's rural communities and local farmers who are bearing the brunt of these policy positions. Care for the environment, like so many other issues, has to be balanced with also prioritizing human life and doing what is realistic. Unfortunately, in California, that balance often gets thrown out the window. We should absolutely say that we should care for the environment. We should not just burn it all down and kill all of the animals. I am not advocating for that. But in California, we go so far the other way that we downplay our role to subdue the earth and to prioritize human life over animal life. I think it's helpful to think about issues like the Point Reyes farmers and other environmental concerns through the lens of three basic principles all held together at the same time. First, we absolutely should steward the environment to the best of our ability. We have limited resources, and so we should take care of what we are able to. But second, human life has to take priority over environmental concerns or animal life. And third, we have to advocate for policy positions that are wise, prudent, and effective uses of both taxpayer money, but also on human impact. That means that if we are proposing environmental policies, we should make sure that they are realistic and that they are reasonable and that they will actually help the environment in the ways that they claim. Let's apply all of these principles to the Point Reyes farm closures. First up, we should care about the environment and we should seek to steward it where we can. The reality is that the Point Reyes ranchers were already doing that. They were pioneers in many sustainable farming practices that have actually been adopted statewide. Some examples of the innovation that was taking place by the Point Reyes ranchers were rotational grazing, no-till seeding, manure management, which is where farmers actually take cow poop and turn it into energy to run their farms. Solar arrays and other forms of renewable energy were also prioritized, animal welfare practices, closed-loop water systems, and so much more. The conversation around the Point Reyes ranchers often boils down to cows versus elk, but these ranchers were trying to be models of sustainable agriculture in our state and trying to comply with California's climate goals. They complied with the first principle to try to steward the environment to the best of their abilities, and it's completely unfair for environmental activists to not recognize their efforts and their contributions to this space and to instead just insist that they be shut down. Our second principle is that humans have to outweigh animals and other environmental concerns at the end of the day when the two are in conflict. But we clearly see that this is not the case in this situation. These farmers contributed 20% to the local food production and to the overall economy of the county. By forcing them to move, we are removing so many jobs away from hardworking people, both on the farms and around the farms in the local communities. We're also forcing people to move their families out of the county because it is too expensive for these farmers to live in the Bay Area without being able to operate their farms. All of that for what gain? That the Tule Elk are undisturbed and are able to populate freely? Who does that help? Why are they prioritized over human beings? If the extinction of this elk means the flourishing of an entire community and an entire economy, then that should absolutely be prioritized over the animals. And lastly, we have to advocate for wise, effective, and prudent policy positions that actually make real change. But we've just seen that these farmers in Point Reyes contributed so much to sustainable agriculture and to environmentalism. So by shutting down their farms, we are not helping the environment. We are actually moving backwards. This is not wise or effective. It's just a power play by radical environmentalists who want to prioritize every species of plant or every species of animal over human life. It is wrong, and it is a tragic loss to Marin County and to Point Reyes. So we need to change the narrative across our state about environmentalism. We should not be pitting farmers against the environment. That is a false choice. Instead, we should champion the farmers who take on the challenge, who rise to the occasion to innovate in real time to meet California's environmental goals while still providing valuable jobs and also food production to our local communities. If California is serious about actually investing in the environment, then we cannot do it without the people who grow our food. Let's invest in solutions that allow lands and livelihoods to thrive, not either or, but both. If you want the full breakdown of what's happening with the Point Reyes farmers and action items of how you can oppose the closure of these farms, then you should check out my full-length podcast episode linked below. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope it was helpful for you as you navigate life in our state and that you even learned something new. You can follow me on social media at It's Tess Abraham, and I'll see you back here next time for another episode of the California Conversation.